I'm about to share 21 hero section examples with you from real websites so that you can copy these layouts. Isn't it wrong to copy other people's work? Yes, if you're appropriating the entire design or stealing images, and especially if it's for a commercial project. But copying these layouts as a form of practice is a great way to get the skills under your fingers, and if you stick around for the whole breakdown rather than just scanning through the images in this video, you'll begin to understand why these different layouts work so well. The hero section is the most important part to get right because it's the first thing people see on your website before they start to scroll. So let's see how these examples are successful at orienting and retaining viewers. We'll look at some more interesting and experimental design as we progress, but let's start with a standard format. How do we elevate the default text left, image right layout? On this site it works because the typesetting is very well done on that left column of text. We can read that headline very clearly with big contrast. There's a sense of scale between the size of that headline and the type underneath, and then the image on the right is actually not just plonked on the right, it's kind of this separate thing, but it feels more integrated with the headline because it actually goes underneath and wraps nicely around the headline itself. And they've kept that whole top section compact, so then you can see a little bit of what's below will lead you straight into the website. And on the mobile, it's that standard format of just putting the image underneath that text, so we can still have a nice measure line length on the text. With this site, we still have the text left, image right in general, but what they've cleverly done is they have a concept, they have a creative idea behind it, and that creative narrative that can flow through your site can really help elevate your work. So in this case, because the company is called Runway, it looks like a boarding pass, this whole hero section, and then they've used those rounded rectangles all the way through to give it an interesting look, because you know a screenshot of a website is pretty boring, but putting it within that airplane window really just makes it that bit more interesting. The centered layout with text just centered on a full bleed image background is kind of a default thing in a lot of templates, and oftentimes it doesn't work because the text is competing with the image, it's not very legible underneath. So what they've done here to elevate a very simple basic layout is to make sure there's good clear space for the text, so the dark text appears on the light background of the sky. And also on the desktop layout, the whole shape of the hills there is framing again and drawing the eye in towards that headline. Unfortunately on mobile they've failed to do that, and really they should have just centered all the text there just the same and given it a bit more room, so that would work more effectively. In this example it's similar, but they've actually integrated the headline text into the image, so they're using the principle of depth by having the text in front of some of the trees and behind others, but it also is a similar sort of proportion and size to the product that is in the main view of the shop. And then to add some interest, and this is more interesting on a live site than these screen grabs, because the video in the bottom right is playing, and then you can click on that to see more, so it draws your eye down there while still having this poster-like look to the main hero section. With full bleed images, you can also use maybe a bottom row as they've done here, so we can really see and appreciate the image because we have the product right at the center of the frame here, the thing that we want to see, that's the star of the show. But then we have almost a bottom row, and the navigation and all those other bits are really out of the way, so we're focusing on the product. And that bottom row has the headline on the left, and then on the right again a video that is playing in a window, so that we can then click on there to see the full thing. That kind of layout they've realized is not going to work on mobile, so they've just completely changed it, and we've got a real close-up of the product that just becomes kind of a background element, just something graphical, and the video now is the full width. You could also split your headlines, so have part on the left, part on the right, and the image in the middle. This is an image you could try and copy, and they've actually put the primary call to action button, the blue button on the left, and the secondary one, that's white out, on the right. Now on mobile this doesn't work as well, or you can't really produce that same effect in that way because you don't have the horizontal real estate, but they've just made use of the vertical space, and it's still really clear with really high contrast and a very simple user interface on mobile, so it still really works. And on the live version of this site, these illustrations of the characters actually scroll through lots of different types of people, different demographics, which makes it more interesting and inclusive. You can also split the headlines in a more compositional type layout. Try something like this. Again, the navigation is tidally out of the way, and we're led towards right in the center of the frame. The focal point is the face of the dog, but then splitting the headline in this compositional way really just adds some visual interest to the scene. It makes our eyes move around the layout, and on mobile they found a way of doing that. It's just a center aligned layout, but it still works with a little overlap of the illustration over the type. What about making the headline the entire hero section? That's what they've done here. So you really just grab people with that. You're not concerned with imagery and how the composition is going to work. It's huge, big. It feels poster-like. It feels like a newspaper headline. And straight away, you are communicating your value proposition. You could try that. This idea of the type being the full viewport width could also be used for a logo, as on Lando's website. When you scroll, they also have a small logo above and a menu appears. But right when the site loads, we have this video playing in the background. But just a huge type gives, again, this sense of scale. And we're seeing this next white rounded rectangle at the bottom, which really communicates who they are, what they do, but it's also encouraging us just to scroll down and see what is there below the fold. But this is a very simple, bold, graphical idea that you can try. Similarly here, it's a poster, and in mobile it actually looks really beautiful because that portrait format is kind of the poster proportion, and you can imagine this kind of poster for an event or a festival on a fly poster around the city or on bus stops, digital ads, and that works really well as a nice composition on mobile. On desktop, I think it's cool too because it's kind of intriguing. We know that there's clearly something below here because it's cut off. You can drag your window. Maybe you've got a narrower window on screen in the browser and it's looking a bit more like the mobile view in terms of the composition. But actually, again, making the logo or the name just the full width and making it huge and really going for that. What we don't want in layouts is too many medium-sized elements. We want something that's huge, something that's small to give it the sense of scale between the two, and then use a sensible amount of medium-sized elements with it. They've used this same effect on this website for an agency in France, and again, it's the name, it's the logo that is huge. But what's different here is we're beginning to see into the projects. So on desktop here, we can see the first 3 projects. On mobile, we can only see the first one, but it is encouraging us to scroll. It's encouraging us to go further. And that's the whole point of a hero section. You don't want people to leave your website straight away. You want them to hang around. So how about trying this out, where on desktop, you just use the whole left side for a logo, and maybe just a simple proposition there in that line of text below, and then on the right you can use imagery or even these layers of the first few pages or sections or projects on the website. A different way to split, instead of splitting horizontally or down the vertical middle and having two halves, you could have a top and a bottom, and this is for a museum in Amsterdam. So as well as this split of the yellow on the top and this brown on the bottom, we have a few other interesting things going on this website. One is there's 2 navigations. So we have the navigation at the top with familiar things like visit and about and support, and a separate buy tickets button on the top right. This is the key call to action. But that icon is then repeated on the left. Now, the principle of UI is that we don't usually just use an icon by itself. Usually an icon and a text label together is the best way, but you can roll over and expand this menu. And I also think that they have done a good job of picking pretty familiar icons. Just looking at this now, it appears like we've got like a calendar of events, then tickets, search, location. What would the clock be? I'm not sure about that one. Reminders or usually, so that one's maybe a bit unusual versus the calendar. But this idea of maybe having some icons that can pop out, and then you can see on mobile, that works really well because the most important 4 icons are there at the bottom, so it feels more like an app when you're on the mobile website. But then you can click the hamburger menu in the middle to expand the menu, which is the top center navigation on desktop. And the other smart thing about this is straight away we see, although we have the clear explanation of where we are, 1 museum, 2 locations, so that orients the viewer, we also have this what's on section that we can see below, and that's always visible when you first load the website, whether on desktop or mobile. And that's smart because with something like a museum, people return to the website, so they want to see that it looks different, they want to see that it looks changing all the time, but they've still left themselves some space in that top half to communicate what they're about and make sure the navigation and there's quick links in one click into where people want to be, maybe if they visit regularly, see what's on, buy a ticket. But also the what's on section is going to be changing underneath, so it encourages people to scroll and it feels different, it looks different every time the viewer returns to the website, every quarter, every month or so. You could also go for the sort of no hero section. So if your content is so constantly changing, you don't necessarily need that area that explains this is what we're all about, which is kind of what we're told is always necessary on a hero section. Because if you're going to MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, there's a good chance you know what it is. So if you have a website or a company that is very well known to the users of the site, and you have content that is constantly changing and people that return to the site periodically. So this is the same with like a news website. They wouldn't spend their whole hero section saying, we are a reliable news outlet that seeks to provide. No, they're not going to go into that. They're just going to show you the news and they're going to have the logo at the top. So similarly with MoMA, we've got their logo, we have got their navigation, and it takes up a minimal amount and it's straight into this ever-changing content. But you could probably pick up, even if you'd never heard of MoMA, that it was an art gallery. There's some sort of events going on. You can kind of tell by the way these exhibitions are laid out. Keeping that theme of having the hero section and the main information sort of narrow at the top part of the website, this website for diagram, we have here again the headline and a byline and then a button with a call to action underneath. But these are all into the top third maybe, both on the desktop and mobile side. It gives us loads of real estate at the bottom. They have this animation going on in the background with these planets revolving, which is just a little bit of interest and delight as you see this thing moving. But they're giving themselves lots of room here, and there's lots of negative space though around the headline so that we can be led to it and we can really just grab that and understand that quickly. So it's a smart way of doing it. Again, it's making that whole area where the type is like that kind of medium-sized element, the navigation is a small element, and then the large area is for this background video. The same format is followed on Kuler's site. Small items in the nav, medium size for the headline, and then the large image space is given underneath. And kind of similar with Glide, although what they've done here, they've really felt it necessary. Maybe your client really wants to include a certain amount of text near the top. They've managed here to have this little caption, AI-powered no-code apps, then create business software you actually want, the main headline, then the byline goes on the right. And these columns, just notice they're not the same width. So you can experiment with things like this, where if you've got, say, a 12-column layout, you can use 2-3 columns on the right, and 9 or 10 on the left, and different sort of combinations here. This might be a 8 and a 4 or a 7 and a 5 or something like that. So you can kind of have these column layouts, and that kind of move through your site, taking up a different amount of columns as you go through. On mobile, they've just stacked the whole thing, which is a pretty standard approach, and it keeps your line length and reasonable, and your font sizes at a readable level. Number 17. Now, I do not like the art direction really on this image here. I think they could have done more with this. There's a few different challenges. It looks a bit strange on mobile with that huge button going right over this model's forehead. But I think what is worth maybe copying or trying about this layout is they have these 2 rows at the top, so there's always a space on this carousel for a headline in a place that makes sense. So although maybe the contrast again isn't great, I just thought it's another layout you can maybe try out, where it says remedy and then underneath dark spots dealt with, and as it loops through the different images underneath, you can see that there's 3 dots for 3 carousels. It changes that headline each time, so just having that place for it, maybe you'd make this a lot larger, but just having those horizontal rules, the thin stroke lines, and a space there where the headline belongs is something that you could try out for yourself. What I love about this layout for this drink is that we have this radial layout, so it emanates from the center of the image. So all the characters, the way the illustration is done, and it works great both on mobile and on desktop, is they revolve around the can in the center, so they draw us subtly into it. And obviously the whole art direction of this website just adds that playfulness. It uses the artwork from the can within the website itself, and if this can was just on a white background, it would look a bit flat and it wouldn't suit the personality of the brand. But it's a really smart layout, just using this whole radial layout where everything sort of emanates or points towards some sort of object in the center. It's similar here because the code name, the product name for this watch, ACF01, is right at the center, so that's what we see, and we kind of remember and associate this image. But again, the principle of scale is used, so we have this macro shot of the watch, and it's absolutely huge. It's so big, because it feels like it's spilling off the page. And then we have this really, really small type for the navigation, and even the byline where it reads sleek design, high-tech minimalism. On desktop, that's really quite small. This was screenshot on a big screen, but even so, it's just those 3 elements there of large, medium, small, but used in a smart way. So you could try this where you have a large image in the background, especially a macro shot like this works really well for a sense of scale. It's really close up. But then with the navigation, they've actually put that within a bar, so it's a transparent bar on desktop. On mobile, it's this solid grey background. That way your navigation, the legibility of it isn't going to interfere with the image, and make sure it's always readable. And then we have the medium-sized, headline or title, and the way this is put together is something that would be worth trying out and copying. And there's also some nice art direction. They've just chosen good fonts, and that's all consistent with the graphic design here. Another page of their website shows some similar features. We've got again that full width text using the full viewport width for this WRK, and then very small type, so we have the different large, medium, small elements. But what's cool with the macro image here again is it's cut off, so it's leading us down. We want to scroll, we want to see more of the website, and you want your design to be in a way that encourages people that they know they can scroll and they want to see more. And having to write the word scroll or an arrow maybe shows it's not really working very well, because it's not suggesting that people should do that. And the final example, there's a lot being pulled together here. You can see on the mobile version the full bottle, and so on desktop we're just seeing a part of it. So again, that principle where we're being encouraged to scroll. We've got that full viewport width type for this word iconic here, and then it later reveals the next word, functionalism. So that's their proposition, iconic functionalism. But there's also some more interesting things going on. So I like how on mobile you can just see that full title with the bottle in front, and it's just a very graphical, again, poster-like design. But on desktop we have actually grids going on with these 3 columns, and there's actually more columns than that because of the way the navigation, is aligned to the side. But we have these 3 columns for the type. So although there's quite a lot of type here with this sentence on the left, then there's 2 sentences in the middle paragraph, then we have the contact details on the right, we're able to take them in one at a time, and it's a really good layout of just drawing our eye around it. We see this huge word iconic, and it might encourage us to just scroll, but we can look around and just kind of appreciate that there's very deliberate alignment here with the use of the columns, and the use of negative space just allows us to move around the layout. So get into more detail, try things like this where you've got some things that are full width, some things that overlap to give this sense of depth, like a bottle on top of the type. Then maybe you've got a 12 column layout and you use 3 columns in some points, and just making sure your alignment is very deliberate, but there's white space around things is definitely something you could copy and try out here. There's lots more videos on web design and layout here on the channel, so make sure you save them for later. It might be time now though to stop watching and start practicing. So until next time, happy designing.